your sound better.
Hey there, my name is Cameron, also known as Venus Theory, and today I'm here with my friends at WA Production to show you around 5 awesome free plugins you can download right now to start making better tracks today. All of these plugins are linked down in the description below, and they're all compatible with both Mac and PC. With that, let's dive right in and check them out. First up, we have a plugin that isn't a synth or an audio processing tool, but is something that I think every producer needs, and that is a good signal analyzer. This is a plugin called Signalizer, and I think it is one of the most comprehensive and probably one of the best signal analysis tools that you can get, and it's absolutely free. First up here, we have the vector scope, which is a really handy tool to get an idea of the phase correlation of your track as well as the stereo image. There's also a polar vector scope here. We can go into the presets with this little wrench icon and switch this to polar mode, and we can see a better kind of visual representation of the stereo image in a bit of a different way. There's also an oscilloscope here, so this is a really handy tool to visualize the waveforms of something like, let's say, a kick or a bass, or maybe you just want to check the crest factor on how your track is looking on the master. And there's also a spectrum analyzer to get an idea of how your sounds and how your track is sitting across the entire frequency spectrum. You can also go into the color tools here to bring in the grid. This way we can see the loudness of each of the individual frequency areas here, and the frequencies listed out just as a grid. There's also some presets for this, so if we go into the preset list here, you can also change this over to a spectrogram. So this is really an all-in-one solution for anything related to visualizing a signal, and it's totally, absolutely free. Next up here, we have Valhalla Supermassive, which is an incredibly awesome delay and reverb unit. On the reverb side, it's meant more to be one of those giant ultra washy reverbs, so it's particularly good for ambient styles or creating risers, cinematic booms, and things of that nature. It's not a kind of general tight reverb like you might use on your drums or a vocal. It's really meant for these huge, washy, expansive sounds. First up, let's take a listen to the delay side of things. So I've got a sound here which is just a combination of a soft grand piano and a synth pad with an ARP layer. It sounds like this. So it's not really that fascinating, and we can bring in this instance of Supermassive with the dotted 8 chorus echo preset. I mixed this in just under 50%, so this should add some rhythmic interest, particularly off the pinging ARP layer. Supermassive is really useful as a delay, but I think it really starts to shine on the reverb side of things. So here I've got the Final Frontier preset up mixed in just over 20%, and that takes the sound to this. As you can hear, we get these really lush, long reverb tails, but one of my favorite tricks with this is actually to use these giant reverb modes. You can switch between the different algorithms here in the mode and just mix this in 100% and put maybe a chord or just a single note through it and then resample that to use as like an ambient pad or drone texture. So that was just one chord. And this will echo out like forever and ever and ever, especially if we increase the feedback and the density. You can get these really lush soundscapes by just putting something simple like a piano and pad through it. And that's all there is to it. Of course, no production setup is complete without a nice workhorse synthesizer, and unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard about this one, which is Vital from Matt Teitel. The free version of Vital is fully functional and comes with everything you need to get started creating your own sounds, as well as a handful of presets, but there are also some paid editions that offer more presets and a couple of extra things. Vital offers a very clean sound and some really deep modulation possibilities to create some incredibly complex patches using the 3 oscillators and the sample oscillator. So here I've got a sound I made just using one note and running it as a sequence. So I'm going to hold down one note and we'll get this. Which is a really powerful thing to have access to, especially for free. You can also load your own custom wavetables into Vital, so here I made a sound using some analog sampled waveforms to get a nice warm, rich sound out of Vital, and it sounds like this. Vital offers a lot of really cool sound design tools, including a couple of macros to get control over your patches. It fully supports MPE if you have an MPE controller and really want to take things up a notch. It's got some classic warp modes, as you might know them from other synthesizers, including FM for classic FM sounds, and some really unique spectral distortion modes that take a waveform apart in some really interesting ways. Beyond that, you get a bunch of LFOs and envelopes you can assign however you want. You can even modulate the modulation, which is absolutely nuts. There are tons of different filter types to really shape your sounds and dial them in, and of course a bunch of effects to get your sounds ready to go right out of this synth without having to process them after the fact. Here I've put together a preset using a chorus almost as a reverb, a small reverb to add some hype, a compressor in a multiband mode, which is similar to something like OTT for multiband compression and expansion, a distortion, an EQ, and another filter in the effects section. We've got FM, formant movement going on here and all sorts of stuff, which makes these wicked bass sounds super easy to make. Another really awesome free plugin for sound design and for mixing is Ven Audio's Free Clip. This is a clipping utility with a lot of different modes, so you can use it as a soft clipper or a hard clipper, and there's a ton of different types of clipping in here to really dial in the sound with some fine grain control. Free Clip also offers an input gain, a clipping ceiling, or kind of a threshold control if you will, the output gain, and internal oversampling up to 32 times, so it's a really powerful, totally free clipping utility. To give this a spin, I've got a drum break, I've got some snares and some kick drums to demonstrate this on. So first up, let's take a listen to the drum break and we'll start clipping it using Free Clip. Now, let's start working through some of the other clipping modes and see if you can pick out some of the differences. Next up here, I've got a snare sound, so let's dial this in and just start crushing a snare drum. And finally, let's try it out on some kick drums. Free Clip is a really great utility for sound design and mixing. It's also really good for mastering. I find it's useful to put maybe right before your limiter so you can clip your track off just a little bit so you can push the limiter just a bit harder and get a little bit of extra volume without totally destroying your sound. Last but certainly not least, we have Chow Tape here, which is one of my favorite tape plugins and one of my favorite plugins all around, especially lately. I've been using this thing so much. Chow Tape is a really interesting plugin because it's not trying to model any specific tape deck like you would get with some of the other tape plugins, but rather this is a physical modeling plugin that models the characteristics of tape. What sets this apart from other tape saturation plugins, like I said, is it's not trying to model any specific tape machine, just the characteristics of tape. And with that, you get a lot more control than you would with other tape plugins. Here we can adjust the gap, which is the gap between the tape and the playhead. We have control over the thickness of the tape, the amount of degradation, the chew, which is kind of like the sound of tape dragged through a parking lot or something. You can adjust the tone, the tape bias, the amount of saturation, the amount of flutter and wow, or just kind of, the woobly warbliness we associate with tape, and just about everything else you could want access to. Here I've prepared kind of a basic lo-fi type thing. I've got a Rhodes, some drums, and a bass. And if you take a look at my mixer, I've got Chow Tape on the Rhodes, on the drums here, on the bass here, and then I've grouped all of these things together and applied another instance of Chow Tape to the group. So right now they're all bypassed, and that's the only thing I'm going to add in, and you will be amazed at the difference this makes. First up, let's solo out the individual elements just to hear Chow Tape in action isolated. Let's take a listen to this Rhodes loop here. So just a nice, clean, glassy Rhodes. Let's bring in Chow Tape. And we've got that really lovely, gritty, warbly lo-fi tape sound in seconds. Next up, let's take a listen to it on some drums. So we've got these kind of knocking lo-fi drums, but they don't really have much character to them. Let's bring in chow tape. So that really adds some punch and rounds off the transients in a nice way. Finally, let's take a listen to this on some bass. So here I've just got a nice kind of low dub bass. But again, maybe a bit digital and doesn't have much character. Let's bring in chow tape and see what that does. So like the drums, it just rounds things off and adds a bit more grit to them in a really pleasing way. Now let's take a listen to everything together before chow tape and then after, including applying it to the bus. And now let's take another listen to things with chow tape applied. And there you have it, 5 totally free plugins you can start using in your tracks today. Be sure to subscribe to the channel down below for more videos like this one, and thanks for watching.